The massive lawsuit filed by the Macrons against Candace Owens is extraordinary and unprecedented on many levels. This is the world leader suing a US citizen for defamation in a US court. And the US citizen is not a legacy news brand or a business mogul, but a successful podcaster, which is a measure of the shifting balance of power in media. President Macron and his wife Brigitte accused Candace Owens of relentless worldwide bullying and a campaign of global humiliation over the repeated claim that Brigitte Macron is a man. Macron has tried other methods of warning Candace to drop the issue, including, she says, asking President Trump to call her directly, which he did. Well, so far, the main impact of the lawsuit has been to bring the Brigitte claims to an even bigger audience, with prominent coverage everywhere from NBC to CNN and the BBC. But many legal commentators reckon it's Candace Owens who ought to be worrying. So is she? Well, in a moment, I'll ask her. But here's a reminder of how we got here.
I think you're a man. I think it's beyond obvious that we're born a man. You may want to split hairs about, well, I'm really a woman. I feel on the inside, I'm a woman. That insulting wig that you're wearing, it's ridiculous. It's like you're laughing at us. What I'm saying is that you were born a man and you will die a man. It is very clear that Brigitte Trogneau existed. It is very clear that she was, in fact, the sister of Jean-Michel Trogneau. And I think that if I am guessing what took place here, Jean-Michel Trogneau took Brigitte Trogneau's identity at some point. It's plausible that Brigitte Trogneau got sick, that the real Brigitte Trogneau got sick and perhaps had a dying wish to help her brother. It's very early on, but I know that the process is supposed to be the pain, that they want to drag this out. I can't see them wanting to make it to discovery. I just don't see that happening. I think they'll fake kill Brigitte first. Like they'll be like, oh, Brigitte passed away from stress because of what Candace did.
Well, the host of the Candace Show, Candace Owens, rejoins me now. Candace, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Piers?
I'm good. Are you a woman?
I am, in fact, a woman, and I certainly would never sue someone to prove to the world that that is a fact. I would probably be laughing.
Well, how can you prove to me you're a woman if I don't believe you?
I wouldn't have to. You could do 18 hours of a show saying that I was living as a man for 30 years. And the easiest thing for me to do, obviously, would be to just release pictures of me living, yearbooks, me on the cheerleading team, me pregnant, me with my children, raising my children, long before, if I ever got to the point where I thought that I needed to launch a lawsuit, I would probably just release a few photos if we're playing devil's advocate here.
But ultimately, the easiest and quickest and best way to prove to me that you're a woman, and I'm not disputing that you're a woman, I think you probably are. I know you like to cast doubt on people's gender and sexuality, so I'll just leave it floating, hoping that someone in the internet world grabs it and makes me tons of money with a, is Candace male or female? But my point is this, you would be able to prove it to me by taking a simple sex test, right? You would just say, here we are, here are the results, here's the sex test. That's the best way to do this, right?
Actually, because we were in communication with her legal team long before she launched this website, we never asked for something that deep. We literally gave her a list of 21 yes or no questions and asked her to just answer it on the record. Also offered to fly over to Paris and interview Brigitte to get her side of the story. Before we even launched the first episode of the Becoming Brigitte series, we were in communication and offered them a chance to rebut. And they came back and said, we don't have to submit anything to prove that she is a woman, and we don't want to answer your questions. I've published those legal letters. It's the reason why people that watch this series are just not believing the media when they pretend that this was like, oh, Candace wanted the blood of the first lady. No. Also, she's not suing. Obviously, my series was based on a book entitled Becoming Brigitte that I did alongside the journalist who worked on this story for 10 years. She's not suing him for defamation, but she is suing him for cyberbullying, which is really, if you read through the lawsuit against me, they are misrepresenting the things that I've said, taking them out of context, and pretty much smearing me in the process by pretending that we asked something extraordinary by saying we won't run this entire series if you can just show us a few photos of you living in this 30-year period.
Right. I think photos can be easily manipulated. We know that in the modern era. I just think a sex test is definitive. And the reason I'm asking you this is because I'm assuming maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'm the deluded one here. I don't think so. But I'm assuming the only reason that Brigitte Macron and her husband, the President of France, are coming after you personally in American courts for defamation is that they know all they have to do to completely refute your entire conspiracy theory, which is what they say it is they just have to prove she's a woman. If she's a woman, and she's had 3 children, miraculously, and I know I've seen your slightly torturous explanation for how she's managed to secretly have 3 kids, and it wasn't her, and she's a man, but I've seen what you've said. But ultimately, if she proves she's a woman, which is very easily provable, your whole case just implodes, doesn't it?
Well, Piers, it sounds like you're on our side. It's been 10 years of the press saying that she was born a woman. She's sued people for cyberbullying. She's sued people for speaking wrong about a document. And yet the easiest path would have just been to simply release photos from 30 years of your life. That is why this is unbelievable. You're also, I think, largely misrepresenting my series. You showed only clips of me discussing things after the lawsuit, but you didn't actually show anything from my series. I don't think my series has gripped the entire world and caused a global leader to get on a plane and beg President Trump to shut me up because I'm just sitting there going, la, 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 she looks like a woman in a wig. No. It's a very serious subject, actually, Piers. And if you watched even the first episode of the Becoming Brigitte series, you'll understand there's an entire network of pedo criminals that are surrounding the Macrons. They have had multiple scandals regarding pedophilia that have just engulfed his presidency. And they are going after journalists. And to be clear, these were mainstream journalists, not far-right podcasters or however it's being presented in the media today, that were simply trying to do a biography on the First Lady. They were supporters of her. They were feminists. They wanted to basically glorify her as the president's wife, and they fell down a dark hole. Condé Nast journalists, by the way. They fell down a dark hole because they felt suddenly that they weren't able to get any answers to their basic questions. This was a mainstream issue in France. And so I think you do yourself a disservice when you misrepresent it as if I'm just like sitting here going, la, 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 she's wearing a wig. You know, show the real excerpts from the Becoming Brigitte series. It's incredibly compelling.
No, I saw that.
Even you could ignore that it's strange. It's strange. Like 30 years of it. Why would you go through all this effort when you could just drop photos of 30 years of your life where you allegedly had 3 children? Where are your children, by the way?
Allegedly had 3 children.
Wouldn't your children come out, Piers, and defend you by just dropping pictures of their childhood with you? Do you know her children won't do that? And yet miraculously, those same children do
Candace,
drop photos of their father?
All right, Candace, let me present another series of explanations for what's happened here.
Sure.
I believe, and maybe I'm wrong, all right? So let me put that caveat at the start here. Maybe you're right, okay? I don't think you are. I think you've been hoodwinked by these journalists who have gone on a complete fantasy trail of nonsense, trying to suggest Brigitte Macron never had 3 children, is a man, it's all a lie, and all the stuff that you've been doing on your channel and getting huge traffic for and making tons of money. So if you're right, it's been a magnificent display of fearless journalism exposing a bombshell revelation about the First Lady of France. I absolutely make no bones about that whatsoever. But if you're wrong, as I believe, I genuinely believe you're wrong, then it leaves 2 avenues of explanation for why you would pursue this so aggressively. One, you've been duped by these French journalists. And secondly, worse, that you kind of know it's not true, but you've ridden the wave of conspiracy theory about it because it's been so lucrative and it's gone around the world, like you've been saying. And I think that is why they're suing you, because ultimately they know that you've been amplifying this massively more than the journalists had in France, getting way more global traction. And it boils down to one simple fact, not photographs, as you keep trying to distract me with, but a sex test. If on day 1 of this case, she just produces an actual sex test report that says she's a woman, you're going to realize in that moment you've been completely duped. What do you do then?
Piers, I'm not concerned about it because, like I said, it's been about 10 years and Brigitte could have done that at any moment. She's been in multiple lawsuits, involved in lawsuits, trying to shut journalists up. I mean, you really are asking people to defy their common sense in this moment. They know what has happened here. They know that we went to Brigitte before we started this series to get Brigitte's side of this. We were in contact with Brigitte's lawyers, the same ones that filed this case. We asked simple yes or no questions. We were not requiring a blood test. We were asking, can you confirm this is you in this photo from the childhood that has been produced, ironically, by a woman who was charged for forging documents. That woman's name is Mimi Marchand, and she was the first couple's PR person until she got in too much trouble for being a gangster and forging documents. They refused and declined to answer those questions. So, like I said, you are asking people at home to suspend their common sense and to truly believe that rather than answering yes or no questions, rather than maybe at first going after the author of the book, Xavier Poussard, who is a Frenchman, for defamation, that would be the first thing. Why don't you launch, at least at the same time, both of these suits? I'm going to go after Candace and Xavier Poussard. They are instead only going after me for defamation and not the person who sourced this entire quote unquote rumor. There is, let me tell you, Piers, too many people who have watched this series, okay? They're watching your show now and they know that you are not accurately presenting what has happened here. But also, Piers, I think you are better than defending a pedocriminal network, right? And that's the biggest piece of the story is how many people around them have gone down, publicly admitted that they were pedophiles and were involved in this campaign at the beginning. Even if you removed the allegation, which I believe from the bottom of my heart, like I said early on, I would stake my entire career on the notion that she was actually born Jean-Michel Trogneau. I believe that, right? And I'm willing to go through this because it's an important story about government deception. But even if you suspended that, you are right now defending a government that lied even about the beginning of their quote unquote love story, in which his parents removed him from school because of this creepy 40-year-old teacher who found a 14-year-old student to be sexy or attractive. This is wrong. Everything that's happening right now in France is wrong and it is perverted. And as a mother, I will stand up to this. And I am confident that we will emerge as the winners of this because in America, truth is an absolute defense against defamation. And I am telling the truth.
Yeah, it is an absolute defense. And I think there are perfectly legitimate questions about how their relationship started, the massive age gap, and the rest of it. I don't dispute that for a moment. But, you know, as you say, in a defamation case, it ultimately comes down to truth mattering. And it seems to me this whole case is going to be resolved in a very straightforward way, because the obvious way to prove that you're wrong and have been systematically lying about it, if you've been doing it deliberately or otherwise, but telling a lie about her, which has obviously caused an enormous amount of hurt, is if they just produce evidence she's a woman. Do you accept if they do that, your whole case disintegrates? Of
course it would disintegrate. Well, first off, no, they would have to prove the actual malice standard in America, which would mean that we knowingly knew this. We went to them with questions and they refused to answer. That is very strange. You're saying you're a victim now because this series came out, and yet you had the power to stop the series when we came to you and said, we're not interested in telling any lies. We actually want to get to the truth of this story. And we asked very simple questions. Did you ever live as a woman named Veronique? I believe, yes, Brigitte Macron, before taking on the identity of Brigitte Trogneau, lived as a woman named Veronique. Why wouldn't you just answer that question and say no? If it gave you so much grief that this rumor was out there, why not respond to that effectively in the 10-year period that you had the time to respond to it? Okay, Brigitte is not a victim. Far from that, I believe Brigitte is actually somebody who has victimized Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron is pathetic. He's absolutely pathetic for letting this go on for so long. You could easily dispel these rumors. And like I said, we were asking for photos from a 30-year period of Brigitte's life. We were not asking for blood. We were asking for simple answer, yes or no. Could you show us some photos of you raising your alleged children? They failed to produce that and now are pretending that they're victims. And of course,
they're under no obligation. Candace.
Right,
Candace,
they're not, but don't
no
then complain
obligation.
and say you had to file a lawsuit. They contacted us, Piers. You're under no obligation. We didn't reach out to them.
They
reached out to us first.
Hang on. They say they made it crystal clear to you that all your claims were wrong, right? That your basic premise that she's a man is wrong. They said they told you that before. You went ahead anyway. You've carried on. Even when they launched the lawsuit, you've carried on saying the same stuff, right? And it's a massive play on your part. Listen, I admire your balls. I mean, it's probably the wrong term to use, given the issue we're discussing. But I do admire your balls, right? Because you're going for it and you're doubling and trebling and quadrupling down. But ultimately, your entire reputation is now directly linked, it seems to me, to whether Brigitte Macron is male or female. If she proves she's a woman, where does that leave you?
If she was going to prove she was a woman, she would have done it over the last 10 years. And like I said, they came to us first and we said, we will not publish this series if you answer questions. Okay. So they were on the offense in that moment. I didn't go to them and go, I deserve a response to this. They had their lawyers email us speaking about this question. And so I have been completely honest and transparent with my audience. This matters to me because I'm a mother, and there are too many people around them that have been charged with pedophilia, many who have admitted that they were pedophiles, not even just pedophiles, incestuous pedophiles, people that molested their children that are surrounding them. Even the lawyers that they're dealing with are lawyers that defend pedophile and incest, preferring it to as happy incest when children are molested by their fathers. That's their current lawyer who has attached himself to this case in France, Eric Dupont-Moretti. Everywhere you look, you see a story regarding incest and pedophilia that surrounds this couple. I have presented that to the public. And if you are going to pretend that they have not lied, Piers, a couple of weeks ago, when Brigitte smacked Emmanuel Macron on camera on the plane, the Élysée Palace answered and said that it was Russian propaganda and that it never happened. They lie all the time. And it's very easy to lie in France, where they have laws against speech and laws against cyberbullying and where journalists are afraid. It's not so easy to lie in America. I'm glad they brought this to my turf, because now the French people are watching and cheering, knowing that this couple has lied to them from the very beginning. They are due for an exposure. And no, I do not believe that she is going to be able to now, or willing to suddenly prove that she is a woman when she could have done that for the last 8 years.
Okay, tell me about the phone call from Donald Trump in which he tried to get you to drop all this.
Yeah, certainly. I received a phone call, and to be clear, this was on the very same day that Emmanuel Macron visited the White House, ostensibly to discuss Ukraine and Russia. I received a phone call at first from a third party saying that, and what I was told was that Emmanuel Macron, who was negotiating in good faith regarding an end to the Ukraine and Russia war, which would have required his signature on some EU stuff, was holding up stuff because he wanted Trump to speak to me, to get me to stop talking about Brigitte Macron. Again, very odd measure when we already said that we would stop speaking about Brigitte Macron. If you had simply answered our questions, you could have stopped this. And then the next day, or maybe it was within 48 hours, I received a phone call from Trump himself. He obviously was not following the series. He is not someone who I think watches a bunch of podcasting shows, but he said he was very confused when Emmanuel Macron took him to the side of a car and brought this up, asked him if he knew him, asked me to stop speaking about his wife, wanted him to get in touch with me to make that happen. Again, that's an extraordinary effort for a state leader to get on a plane and speak to another state leader to shut up a podcaster in America, when all you have to do to dispel the rumors is to tell the truth and answer the questions. It's so easy. It's so easy to do that. I would never let it get to a point where I had to sue
what did you say to Trump?
Podcaster in France. Well, I told him in the short run, while they were having those negotiations, that I wouldn't say anything, which is why we didn't report on it for, I think it was about 4 months or 5 months later. And that then afterwards, once they were done having those discussions, that I would reach out again and tell the person that I was going to speak about it publicly on my platform, because obviously I believe in free speech.
I mean, it's a fascinating situation that you've got a world leader coming after a podcaster. That on its own is fascinating, but it's because you have such a big following, and because they believe, from my understanding, that unlike the French journalists, where they were getting a small amount of traction, but not very much, it's only when you embraced this wholeheartedly and began to do this as a big series on your very popular show and channel, that at that point they realized this was going around the world and they had to do something about it. And they've launched this unprecedented act. I just can't, I mean, look, again, I might be wrong, but I cannot imagine a scenario where the president and the first lady of France launch an action like this unless they are 100% certain that they are right, that she is a woman.
Okay, then can you answer why?
Because
you're saying it's because I'm big. They've gone after small journalists, right? They just lost in the upper courts against the initial journalist that brought this forward for defamation. If you lost this on your home court, why would you take this lawsuit overseas? It doesn't make any sense, right? There had to have been some evidence presented, which they only presented an expired ID, which is completely ridiculous, an expired voting ID. So you're telling me that you're not going to go after, you lose in the journalist on your home court, but you take this now overseas because I'm a bigger journalist. And to be clear, Piers, Xavier Poussard, they did launch a legal action against him on the same day they launched a legal action against me, okay? But they're not suing him for defamation. They are suing him for cyberbullying. So I got all of my information sourced from Xavier Poussard's book. I did a presentation on Xavier Poussard's book, and yet you don't go after Xavier Poussard for defamation, and he lives in France. Why is that? The answer to that question is because Xavier Poussard has been on the offense against them. He won in the courts to have her Sacré-Cœur, which is Sacred Heart, is where Brigitte Macron allegedly went to school in high school. He won for them to release we would call it in America, a yearbook, which would have had a photo of Brigitte Macron in it. The school is refusing to give it to him. So the court would have to at first acknowledge the actions that this brave journalist brought against Brigitte Macron to expose this story before they would acknowledge her actions against him. They are being very cunning in how they're dealing with this. They launched this lawsuit because they failed in their first defamation efforts. So they thought if they launched an even bigger lawsuit as a PR move, and to be clear, Piers, this is not all that they've done. We have evidence that they hired a crisis PR team here in the United States before I launched my first episode of Becoming Brigitte. When they were in communication with us back in January, they used a UK firm, and they contacted that UK firm and had them go out to find a crisis PR team in America ahead of my series. Why would you do that? It's completely crazy. You're in contact with us. You have the power to stop this series.
All right. If, as I believe, you are completely wrong and you end up losing this case, would you accept that everything you've been doing, if she establishes to the world she is a woman, that everything you've been doing would constitute, in that eventuality, a very cruel, vindictive campaign of bullying against a woman, challenging
I want to be
her
very clear. I would have never
woman.
done this. Like I said, I was not interested in being the crusader against this, because I went to them and I said, if you answer these questions, we will not run the series. I'm only interested in truth. I only went after the story because I was shocked by the pedocriminal network which surrounds them. It's shocking, okay? There are real children being harmed right now in Paris, and there are real citizens that are being gaslit about these circumstances. I don't know many people who can say, all of my homies are pedophiles, but it just keeps happening by accident. This is a very big story in France, and the people in France are behind me for a reason, Piers. Like I said, this would not have been a globally impactful series if I was just up there flipping my hair saying, well, it kind of looks like her wig is bad. We presented a lot of evidence. Xavier presented a lot of evidence. And I believe in my heart of hearts that she is not only a groomer and a creep for the relationship that she began with Emmanuel Macron when he was just a student and 14 years old in that play, but also that they are liars that are leading this country, France, down the drain. Truly, I believe this in my heart that Brigitte Macron was born a man, was born a child, actually not a man, but born a male named Jean-Michel Trogneau. And everything that they have done has only further led me to that conclusion, because they are not behaving as though truth is on their side. You don't try to silence journalists.
Well, last time we discussed this on Uncensored, I bet you $150,000 that you were wrong and that she's a woman. On X, when we discussed this further, I doubled it. This is for charity, to $300,000. You haven't accepted that yet. So right now, $300,000 to charity. I say she's a woman. Are you prepared to take that bet?
I'm 1,000% prepared to take that bet. I actually didn't see your tweet, or I would have accepted it live. So we can totally accept that bet.
Okay,
I believe Brigitte Macron is a male, and that they will not be presenting any evidence to the contrary, because they would have done it already.
Okay. Candace, I appreciate you coming on Uncensored. I think you're completely wrong, but we shall see. I think the great thing about this action is we're going to get to the bottom of this extraordinary story. Thank you very much indeed for coming back on.
I'll be back to get my money, Piers.
We shall see. I'm very confident.